We're live. Cool. Hello, hello. Mute this. Sweet. There's Kaylee. Good timing. All right. What's up, WODprep? If you're new, welcome. If not, still welcome. But I'm Coach CJ. I'm the head coach here at WODprep. This is Coach Joe. We don't see him too often, but he's one of the PTs here. And Kaylee is popping in right now. And so, yeah, so what we're going to do today is we're just going to answer some questions. We talk about some of the things that are going on in WODprep in our training plan. So first, if you're watching, I'd love for you guys to comment on the YouTube in the chat. Just say who you are, where you're from, how long you've been part of our training, our online training plan. If you're brand new, definitely want to hear from you. Kaylee, what's up?
Hey, how y'all doing?
Good.
Joe, why are you smiling?
You're just late, and it makes me laugh.
You were late. It was frustrating. We were trying to
I actually was on a client call and we ran over, and my client is the one that reminded me that I was supposed to be gone at 10. And I was like, thank you.
Unacceptable. Everyone just know Kaylee's fired. She will no longer be in the intermediate chalk talks. Joe, you're up.
God.
So, all right. So we actually have a lot of good questions over the past few days. We're in a new phase right now. And so, hello. Whoops. Sorry, I just muted this. That's weird. All right. Yeah, so let's kind of dig right at first. I want to know what each of you two are doing for training. No one asked, but I'm curious. So Joe, what does training look like for you these days?
Ooh, okay. So I have recently joined a CrossFit box, which,
For those of you that don't know, Joe is a power lifter at heart, turned CrossFitter by me forcefully. So,
well, I made the recent realization that I'm not good at powerlifting. I'm better than most general people, but that is not saying a lot. And so, yeah, I just wanted to be, I guess, more mediocre at more things. And so I have hung up my specialization only into the heavy lifting and eased back into CrossFit. And so I'm training at Great Falls CrossFit here in Montana 2 days a week. And I think that they follow Mayhem programming apparently. But yeah, I'm doing that a couple days a week. And then I'm still doing some other things to help make sure that my knee stays in peak physical condition while I return to high volume cycling. Yeah, just general skill acquisition. I was doing a lot of double under practice yesterday, as well as accumulating. What's that?
Got him yet?
Like 3 in a row. But then I pike and it all falls apart. I think I just don't have the conditioning to do double unders. So I did like 5 rounds of 30 seconds of like hard penguin claps yesterday. And I did 15 minutes of toes to bar doubles. So on the 30, I was just doing doubles.
I like it.
My shoulders feel great.
Volume accumulation. That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
Kaylee, tell me about it. What's training look like for you?
I go to Mako Athletics, and right now I'm just pretty much taking class and maybe a little bit of extra on whatever I do. But that's pretty much it. I did about 3 competitions in the past year, and I trained and prepped for Murph, which Coach CJ, the lovely Coach CJ here, got me a massive PR, and even better than like with a weight vest than without a weight vest, which is crazy. But I kind of go on this roller coaster sometimes where I'm prepping for a lot of comps, follow more of like a comp program, and then after that I just do my own thing for a little while until I get motivated for something else.
Awesome. Comp. I always just make fun of Danny. We would say, because she say comp every 4th word. Danny was a member of our gym. Me and Kaylee go to the same gym. Well, cool. So did you push press and front squatted yesterday? Yes.
I did not do that. I actually did my own thing because I didn't feel like one rep maxing.
Got it. Sorry, Jim.
That's the best. What are you talking about? You don't feel like it.
I'm a gymnast girl. I don't
Lame.
like one rep
Did you say
maxing.
wait, what did you just say?
I like gymnastics.
Oh, I 100% thought I heard I'm a sub max girl. And I was like, we're just gonna like, I was like, I don't even know how to assess that at all. So we're just gonna like, pew. Cool. Awesome. Well, good stuff. So my training, some of you know, some of you don't know, I've gone through some health stuff over the past 6 months, almost to the day. It's actually 6-month anniversary was on the 20th. And just this week, really, I've kind of made a really big turn in a lot of my training. My blood pressure is just tolerating intensity a lot better, meaning it's not spiking, which allows me to push intensity more, which is really cool. I actually, I got like a little bit of gymnastics, like hands from some strict pull-ups that I got to do kind of under fatigue yesterday. And so, yeah.
How many can you do in a row?
What?
How many strict pull-ups can you do in a row?
Like actually fresh?
Yeah.
I don't know, probably 12, 11 or 12. Not that many. You know, it was funny. When the most I've ever done in a row, like real reps, was randomly at the Mako grand opening a couple years ago. When I was like 195, I just popped up and did like 16, and I was like, whoa, what's happening? I was like, I don't do 16 pull-ups ever, but it's coming back. I haven't done that many because like cervical extension, you know. So I just started adding some weighted pull-ups back in. I'm trying to fly. You know what I'm saying?
Should do like behind the neck.
I'm trying to get some wings. You know what I mean? You want to fill out these extra larges. So yeah. All right. So I guess we should talk about not us, and talk about WODprep. I know, but we'll just go in order. Yeah. So we'll just kind of go in order from last Friday. If you guys have any questions, as you're watching, just throw it in the chat. We'd love to answer them, or any comments on what we say for sure. Or if you're watching this on the replay, or you're watching it and you comment somewhere, I'm in WODup. I'll see the comment if you can't figure out how to comment on YouTube or anything like that. So Debbie asks, she would like to understand the concept of stimulus a bit better. Does anyone want to take a jab at this? It doesn't have to be specific to our stimulus per workout, but just the concept of a stimulus, and maybe like how our program is stimulus based over like RX scaled kind of thing. Kaylee, this seems like a really good question for you.
Sure. Stimulus is basically just trying to get the same thing out of the workout for every athlete. So if we're working on long aerobic, or if we're working on quick sprint, or whatever we're working on, we want everyone to get that same stimulus. And so the air bike actually recently is a good example of this. So maybe for 10 calories, it might take someone a minute, and then maybe for someone else, it might take them 10 seconds. And so that's going to be a massively different stimulus for both. And so we kind of adjusted that to be a time frame now. So everyone's getting the same time frame on the bike. And in intermediate track, instead of giving those RX weights like, 65, 95, whatever it might be, it's, hey, this should be done in an unbroken set, or this should be done in 2 to 3 sets. So that gives you an idea of what weight you should use to meet the same stimulus. Time caps can kind of help with this a little bit, so you're not doing too much, but you could also just get time capped and not be doing a whole lot of work so that they don't work completely. So the best way to do this is to just modify the workout to fit you to get whatever the intended stimulus is out of it.
Yeah, so we use the term stimulus based instead of RX or scaled because it's not scaled, right? Like I wouldn't consider it, from the general terms, I wouldn't consider myself a scaled athlete, or Kaylee, Joe maybe in some things, but at the same time, if we're working out next to, Laura Horvath, like we are very unlikely going to be able to do the same workout as her, even though we can do all the movements. We can lift, close to as much weight or whatever it may be, right? It's a different thing. And so our goal is to elicit a certain physical expression. And so we want that expression to be as evenly balanced across all our athletes, right? So when we write Fran, sometimes we don't do a stimulus base. We do an RX or scaled type of workout, usually a named workout that has a very specific intent. And it's because it's something that's easily tested time and time and time again, right? And so instead of saying scaled, it's not scaled. It's stimulus driven for you. Brent's here, Coach Brent. And so we focus there. That's why you don't see us do a lot of prescribed load. And because we want everyone to have a very similar training experience every day. So, all right. So next one, GESA, G-E-S-A, and no idea. Maybe Brent didn't mean to pop into this meeting. After very high intensities, heavy squats, deadlifts, sprint work, I find it hard to calm back down and often do not sleep well, which makes it hard to recover from the effort. Would you recommend a certain cool down protocol or other strategies to get back to a rest recover state? Great question. Super tough. And I know some people do struggle with this. A couple things that come to mind initially are, when are you working out? For sure. Are you taking stimulants prior to your training? Okay. And then, also, what do you do afterwards? Right. Those are the questions that we would need answered, but we'll kind of give my thoughts. If you're taking a lot of stimulants, cut the caffeine, see if you can keep it just in like a beta alanine or creatine or whatever else. If you're taking a ton of caffeine before any type of aerobic power work, or anaerobic work like the sprint bike stuff, or the shorter workouts, I would cut that caffeine down a lot. If you're doing this late at night, it's going to be challenging. It just is what it is. But the couple things that I like to do is for sure something like this is a really cold shower, right? That's going to help bring your body temperature back down faster and get you back to a homeostasis. Eat a lot of food, a lot of cold water, and if you can't really keep it down, really turning off and kind of shutting down everything around you way earlier than you're used to, right? So like a cold rag over your face, lying down on the couch sort of thing, right, can kind of take you to this sort of like maybe meditative sort of space. But yeah, usually after any of that stuff, we still, if you want to sit on the bike for a couple minutes to cool down, I think that's fine as well. But I think it's going to be very person specific. Joe, you look like you have some thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with the stimulants and the time of training. If you're training late at night, there's like a post-training arousal that happens like systemically that you're just going to be kind of amped up a bit. And so definitely if you're training later at night, then that's just going to be problematic. But I do agree that depending on what you're doing, almost like, is your pre-bed ritual like something that is going to facilitate you going to bed despite being aroused? Then yeah, I mean, the stimulants, I actually don't take any stimulants before I train just because I just work out in the afternoon. And I know that if I did that, then I would, kind of be way too, like I had too much Diet Coke last night and I was up to like 1 a.m. Like seriously.
Most people know, but how what are we talking, like 16 ounces?
Yeah, like maybe 20.
Still only like 80 milligrams of caffeine.
But yeah, I think a way to look, if you are taking stimulants in the afternoon, like within maybe 5 hours of bed, I would question like the trade-off, right? Is the improvement in the training session worth the possible like lack of recovery that you're going to be getting over a long period of time? I don't know. You can still train at a certain intensity without that caffeine or any stimulants, so I would consider that. But yeah, I mean, if the pre-bed ritual is like you come home from the gym and then you're on Instagram and you have like a bunch of lights on and you're watching TV in bed, I would probably say that's probably not a great way to do it. And also, here's a hot take. If you're laying in bed and unable to fall asleep within 15 minutes, I actually would recommend getting out of bed and doing something until you're like tired. Because if I can't fall asleep, I just get up, I do something for like 10 minutes, and then I go and I into another bed that I have the luxury of having, guest room, and sleep in that bed. And usually that change of scenery is helpful to me to like just kind of change the context enough that I can fall asleep. Because if I'm tossing and turning in my bed, and I just know I'm going to go back and toss and turn again. So
interesting. That's an interesting thought. I had to do that the other day, actually. I was really like, I had money on my mind, and no pun intended, I really did. I was thinking about some bills and some like pay stuff, and like I never struggled to like fall asleep. I'm very fortunate to just, no matter what, I could take like a Celsius to the face and like roll in bed and have no problem. And but the other night, I mean, I was just kind of all over the place. We had some car trouble leaving Madison, which means bills are really high and stuff. And so I was really kind of digging in, like I just couldn't shake it. And so I had to get up for like 20 minutes and just crunch some numbers. And then I got back in bed and I was out in 30 seconds. So that's an interesting thought. Kaylee, anything on late night stimulation?
No, I think you guys hit it. I used to be that person that took pre-workout late at night, but I'm also that person that could lay in bed and fall asleep no matter what. So
yeah,
fortunate.
So I'm just going to kind of go over pretty much all the conversation that we've had in WODup over the past like 5 days, because a lot of it was really, really solid since we've had a lot of athletes pop in. So Rob asked, not in the actual questions, but as we get older, we need to focus more on mobility and stay flexible. I miss these exercises in the different warm-up routines. Is it possible to add some specific mobility exercises to the warm-ups in the future? So similar to what Joe was mentioning of like this time commitment or like the, getting rid of caffeine, is it worth, is like the juice worth the squeeze of like the intensity to losing sleep? We only have a certain amount of time in the day to train, and we want to focus on making you guys great CrossFitters. And so we go through aspects of the year where we really focus on positions and structure and, like range of motion and things like that. And then as the year kind of progresses on, we have to really focus on progressing into the sport. And so, but what we do believe, and all of us here, especially the PTs, is that if we're moving through full range of motion every day, that's a lot of mobility work, right? If you're being very intentful, catching jerks, receiving snatches, having good overhead squats, that's going to be, or squatting or deadlifting with, high hips, getting a hamstring stretch, not letting your background or whatever it may be. When we challenge ourselves to be in very good movement patterns throughout our loaded activity, especially in our warm-ups, that's going to be a ton of mobility work. And if you're not feeling that, you're always more than welcome to do more mobility work, but we only have so much time in the day. So we won't write any more work. We would rather give you more loaded resistance training into full range of motion. And the reason why is, one, the research shows that load is going to create tissue change faster than passive. And so what a lot of you are used to is like things like GoWOD or ROMWOD or like supple leopard, like banded and mashing and lacrosse balling and banded stretching and things like that. And that's great. I think those things work really, really well. But for the time that we have at hand, I think moving through a full, deliberate, intentful range of motion works much better, and it's more practical, right? Like, if you can sit in a straddle, that's great, but that straddle still has to be relayed into a squat. And so instead of doing that and then getting into your squat patterns, we suggest just getting into your squat patterns more often. Okay. And so being in those patterns a little bit more and spending more time at end range under a little bit of load or even gravity, right? So that's kind of our thoughts on mobility work. And we'll put it in there sometimes, like if we have a ton of GHDs or like hip flexion or a ton of squatting or stuff, you'll see us put in some pigeon pose or cobra or something like that, right? To just to counteract it right after the workout. But for the most part, the warm-ups are going to be like what we consider appropriate mobility work. You guys have any thoughts or anything on that?
I mean, the cop out that I like to say is you're an adult. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to listen to us. You can put in whatever you feel is necessary according to you. But I would definitely agree that, and CJ and I have presented on this before, like mobility is just the way that we define it, because it's defined in no way relating to range of motion. By the way, the way that we define it is like the ability to get into a position. And if we really think about the strength sport world, skill is going to be everything. And if you have the skill to get into a position, that skill comes from repeated exposures to that position or that thing that you need to build skill in the context that you would want it to be good at. And so doing mobility work is not going to be a close enough context to the thing that you probably want to improve. And so you'd be better at building skill at attaining that position if you just did that thing more often. So
a good example is Javi mentioned that he does extra mobility work before and after, or before every day. Reference Saturday's overhead carries. Well, the double overhead carry is a very challenging thing. That was definitely more of a strength component at the end of a session. But the overhead carry is the best mobility tool, drill, exercise to get overhead positioning. You just have to be very intentful with it, right? But really focus on getting that shoulder full flexion, elbow extended, finishing that position, right? Whether that's no load, a little load, whatever it may be, right? You can band and stretch and lat stretch your way to Mars, but once that load hits, if you're not practicing that specificity, then it's not going to carry over very well. So we feel like this carries over the best. All right, on to the next day. So, all right. All right, no good there. Sunday. All right. So for those that are new, we have an accountability check-in that we just started. We used to do it on the other platform that we were part of. Sarah Otsuko or Aksuido, I think is how you say it. She's watching. She'll yell at me if I say it wrong. Kind of manages. That's just one of our ambassador athletes, and so she'll help you kind of stay on track for some of the goals that you guys are setting, right? So that'll be on every Sunday. All right, so we're not going to go through that. That's super lengthy. You guys are really digging into that, and I love it. All right. So Vinny asks, Q&A, you're getting old when you're hearing about hip knee disc replacement becomes more frequent. What is WODprep's philosophy on the effects of CrossFit training on joints, cartilage, and discs as we get older? Dude, that's such a good question. Such a great question. I'll start and then I'm going to let Joe dig into it. But I'm going to start with saying that just remember the rehab for all of the things that you hear about is exercise. So when you hear that your high school football concussion is like that you got hit really hard when you were 17 and you're now 54, that's why you have all these problems, yet the treatment for it is low-grade exercise or exercise with progressive overload. There's just a lot of confusion, a lot of misinformation out there. And Kaylee, do you want to take it? Does Joe want to take it?
I mean, I don't have like a whole lot to put into it other than kind of like what you said. At the end of the day, exercise is what's going to be good for you no matter what's kind of going on with the joint. So if you're having knee pain, we're going to give you exercise no matter, and it might look a little different, right? You might need a little bit lower intensity, or we might need to start a little bit lower than someone that doesn't have knee pain, but exercise is going to be, for everyone.
Yeah. All right, Joe, what's your philosophy on the effects of CrossFit training on joints, cartilage, and discs as we age?
I have so much to say on this.
All right, can I put you on I got a
Hit me
timer.
with a timer.
Will you tag the
Put you on
resources?
where is it? Oh,
Tag the resources, please. Put them in the comments.
put it in the
My
comments.
brain. 7
right.
years of reading about this.
You got 3 minutes.
All right. So it's called a bell curve, right? We see that there's a low end here, which are outliers, and there's a low end here, which are outliers. And then there's this like average where most people fall in, and then most people fall within 1 standard deviation outside of that. But when it comes to joint health, like general musculoskeletal health, and musculoskeletal health being like bones, connective tissue, muscles, soft tissue, stuff like that, you're going to be unhealthy on either end of the bell curve. And they're really, it's very easy to be on this low end of the bell curve and very difficult to be on this high end of the bell curve. And so the low end of the bell curve, where you're going to be unhealthy as far as musculoskeletal, is if you're not hitting the minimums that we have laid out by like the Department of Health, which is like 2 or more days a week of strength training, plus like, I need to figure out what in hours it is, but 300 minutes of like low level cardio. Is it 5 hours?
A lot of time, by the way, just to make everyone clear.
Right. But I will say that the moderate intensity is like gardening or like walking or like carrying groceries, and vigorous intensity, which you only need 75 minutes on the low end, is like steady state cardio. And so if you're on the low end, meaning that you're not hitting those absolute minimums, which I'm hoping everybody here is, and I know they probably are, then you're going to be unhealthy in the way that you're not applying enough stress to your body to have positive adaptations, right? On the other end, where we have really like the best population that we see this in is like ultra marathon runners, that's when things get way out of hand. And there's actually going to be a degenerative or a negative outcome to that much stress physiologically. And when I say ultra marathon, I mean like 50, 75, 100 miles and like in one exposure, or we can measure that like over a week, not 100 miles a week, but like significant amount.
They're running 100 miles a week, by the way.
Right. And so nobody here is doing that. And so you can rest assured that the things that you're doing within those 1 to 2 standard deviations from that average are going to be health promoting, as long as we're juxtaposing that against you're able to tolerate what it is that you're doing. If you're not able to tolerate it, something's going to fall off of you, possibly. But if you're able to tolerate it and you can build up over time, then it's going to be additive. And we have what's called a linear relationship to exercise, whereas if we do more, you're going to get more health benefits until we have that fall off at the very end. What's my time?
You have 10 seconds. Nailed it.
You're going to be great. Keep it up.
Keep it up. Perfect. So to summarize what Joe is saying is we have to do a certain amount to create stress so that we can be fit, right? That's like the minimum requirements of general fitness, which I don't know what's the percentage of the US population doesn't hit it? Like 70 to 80? 82. Wow. That's insane. So, but on the flip side of that, there's a ceiling, right? And so once we hit that ceiling, then it's no longer health beneficial. And so the analogy and the comparison I always use is CrossFit for GPP or general physical preparedness is an amazing tool for fitness and health. When you add the concept of competition in it, it gets challenging, right? Because we are pushing our body, we want more, and we're going to keep driving. Does that make CrossFit dangerous? Absolutely not. Does it make it inherently bad for our musculoskeletal health? Absolutely not. But when you take anything from fitness and pleasure to sport and competition, the inherent risk increases, okay? The research shows CrossFit's very safe and effective for fitness and health. It's safe from an injury standpoint compared across the board to all fitness activities, right? Recreational basketball, even safer than running, safer than general weightlifting, right? If you look at those numbers. And so to answer, it depends, but for the most part, it's safe. We'll go with like the 90% range. And our goal, especially as physios, is we want to try and provide a program that's very well balanced. That's why we go through large portions of the year without a lot of the traditional intensity, mixed modality, and mainly kipping patterns that are common in CrossFit, right? So we go through long periods so that we can rebuild, right? And like Joe said, right, it's about a progressive exposure. The injuries usually occur when we push the boundaries maybe too quick, too soon. So that's why we take a long off season. We go through lots of building blocks, right, so that we can tolerate it in general, right? Everyone wants to learn how to do kipping pull-ups and muscle ups and things. Well, there's a lot of the year that needs to be spent to just build the tissue tolerance to do those things. Even if you have the skill to do them or the strength or the ability, we have to go through portions of the year for us to actually build up the tolerance within our musculoskeletal system for us to be able to do those effectively without, in volume, without getting hurt, etc. So, Kaylee.
I have a thought on that that you made me think of. One of the biggest things that I think people forget when they have been doing CrossFit a long time, and I'm guilty of this, is, I've been doing it for 10 plus years. So I'm going to have these skills, just like you said, right? I'm going to have muscle ups. I'm going to have pull ups, probably in a pretty decent volume, even if I haven't been doing it. Let's say I take, a month off for whatever reason, something happens, and then I get back. It's probably not a good idea to do 100 pull-ups in the first workout back, because I can, but I probably shouldn't. And so that's something too to look out for, is if you're having to take a big break, just make sure you progress back into your normal routine, progressively.
Yep. And on that note, we have an athlete at our gym in Mako who's been a very high level CrossFitter for a long time and has taken a lot of time off due to some injuries and things like that. And almost every time that he tries to come back, he has the ability and the physical wherewithal to express an insane amount of intensity. He can still do lots of things, but his tissues can't tolerate it, right? And so we see that a lot when, athletes that have a lot of training years under their belt kind of come and go. Just because you have the ability to do that intensity doesn't mean that you should all the time, right? You need to build back into it. Kind of getting off topic here, but okay. All right. So moving on. Roberto, just started WODprep Masters a couple weeks ago. I'm really happy to have joined. My question is at some point in the programming, will we have bar muscle up, ring muscle ups, or those kind of complex movement? Are they in the RX program? So Roberto does intermediate. And so for everyone listening, this isn't all CrossFit. This isn't other programs. This is just us. We have to write our training based on who does our program. So our intermediate track will not have ring muscle up and bar muscle up progressions. The reason why is because the average person in our intermediate track is working on kipping handstand push-ups, strict handstand push-ups, the strength of the upper body strength to tolerate the literally the thing that we just talked about for the last 5 minutes. Okay, they're building that tissue tolerance and the strength to actually do kipping movements, kipping pull-ups, and kipping chest to bars or butterfly work, right? And so that's where that is. Once you have those, we believe you need to have those with good volume and consistency and can do them in workouts before you start that. Now, if you have all of those, but you still want to stay in the intermediate track, we have the fixed length skill courses that you can access in WODup on your timeline. You'll go to programs, fixed length, and you can start it, which is a 2-day-a-week course for muscle ups, bar muscle ups, or handstand walking. Okay. So if you are in the intermediate, we will, at this point, that could change based on the athletes that are in there. We look at the programming and the results literally every day. And so based on what we've seen, what Kaylee has given me is the information is that intermediate is going to stick with, we'll call it like the level 1 gymnastics, right? So kipping pull-ups, chest to bars, toes to bars, handstand push-ups. And that's what we're going to stick with there. We're going to develop those for. If you have those, but you want to stay in intermediate to keep working on those as like a progressive thing, we have those skill courses available to you. Remember, now, if you're in RX, you should for sure have those 4 and probably muscle ups, bar muscle ups, and handstand walks. But if you're missing 1 or 2 of those, that's why we have those skill courses for the athletes in RX that are working through it. Obviously, if you're an intermediate, you can work through them too, right? But that's not really the design. The design is the intermediate athlete is struggling or working through those beginner gymnastic patterns. Kaylee, does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Okay. All right. So DC James, my favorite question of the day. If we're using any fitness trackers like Whoop and the recovery score is in the red, should we decrease intensity of the workout that day or decrease volume or switch to active recovery? I think any usage of fitness trackers to define what you should do for the day is a bad idea. We developed a course on this. I don't even remember what it was called. It was like WODprep recovery. What was it? RX recovery? Recovery RX?
Every RX.
Right. The course started as a way to utilize the green, yellow, and red. And as we dug into it, we realized that you cannot do that. You should assess how you feel. So if you use a Whoop, I wore a Whoop forever. I wear an Oura ring, but I do it too. I kept wearing it because I do like to monitor my sleep. I like to kind of gamify my sleep. When I'm looking at it every day, I'm like, I can sleep more the next day. You know what I mean? So it's more of an internal thing. But for the most part, I never let the green, yellow, red define how we should approach training for that day for a couple of reasons. One, the Whoop is a moving target, meaning if you have 7 great days of sleep and HRV reading, et cetera, then your baseline is elevating up, which is inherently the wrong way to look at HRV usage for recovery. Whoop does things that are just like definitionally wrong when it comes to assessing what HRV means. Okay, HRV is a number. We'll just call it 100 for everyone, right? And so basically, your HRV is 100. That's your balance. That's where you are well balanced. Anything above or below that means you're either sympathetic or parasympathetic. Which means a state of recovery. Okay, Whoop, for some reason, has just established that the higher the better all the time. Now, the higher it is usually a signal of more fitness, like whatever your normal high is, whatever your normal is. So my average HRV is 140 compared to someone's that's 180 or that's 80. In general, I'm probably younger and I'm probably more fit. Okay. But if I have a score of like 240 for that day, which does happen usually after a really big expression of fitness, a competition day, Whoop says I'm even more recovered, which is definitionally wrong when it comes to looking at HRV. So on that note, it's not that great. Now looking at the red, the problem with Whoop specifically is Whoop takes your HRV reading on your first sleep cycle in the night. So if you have even 1 drink or 2 at 9 and you go to bed right after that, you're going to fall into a deep cycle or a REM cycle within the first 2 hours, usually, maybe 3. And it's going to read it then. You're obviously going to be probably very sympathetic, higher heart rate, not sleeping super well at that point. But fun fact, the body will process the alcohol and your liver will do its job and you will recover on the end. But the Whoop reads it early. The Oura will read it later in the night. So I think Oura is a more consistent reader. I don't know as much about Apple Watch, but the answer is no. You should not incorporate that data. What I like to tell everyone that really likes it, one, if they use it and it affects them at all, they have to take it off, especially for competition. I just tell them not to wear it anymore because it can create this subjective or internal struggle that Joe wore one for what, like 8 days and you got rid of it?
Maybe. I have many thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, and so I'll let Joe kind of finish up. I don't think we should use the data and incorporate it into our training decisions. If you like to wear it, you should still wear it. But if you're trying to establish if you should adjust training days, then I want you to basically get up, move around, don't look at your score for the first hour you're awake, assess your training day of how you feel, and then you can look at your score and compare. And most of the time, they're not going to be very comparable. All right, Joe.
All right. have many thoughts on this. So I think the one thing that I would want to piggyback almost in the opposite direction of CJ here is that CJ is assuming that you have a choice in how that color is going to influence you in your training, right? Where you can look at the red and say, I'm not even going to let that influence me. I'm just going to train hard, right? And the problem is that you don't really have a choice on how it's going to influence you. Yes, you can be like, oh, I'm not going to listen to it. I'm not going to put a lot of weight in it. But there's still going to be that sort of almost like unconscious influence on how you're exerting yourself and how subjectively you're feeling during that training, right? We know that there's many things that influence expectations and beliefs that we have no control over, that are just part of our environment. And so to assume that we can just see it be bad or it be good, and then and then say, I'm going to disregard this information and just train as I normally would, I wouldn't necessarily agree with. We know that if we give somebody a placebo medication and just give it to them and have them hold it in their pocket without them actually taking them, that their pain levels are going to go down just because they have it on their person. And so they haven't even taken it yet. And that's subjectively influencing how they are feeling. I think another thing to question is when we look at tools in science, there's something called validity and reliability. Is this a valid measure? And is this a reliable measure? Is this a valid measure? Is it measuring the thing that we are hoping it will measure? And is it reliable? Is it measuring that thing accurately? And so the question we need to ask are these things that are not medical devices measuring the medical marker that we're hoping to get information on, right? If you go to a sleep doctor and they do a sleep study, they're not going to put an Oura ring or a Whoop on you. They're going to put a helmet with many leads that are going to measure the magnetic, like electrical activity of your brain while you're asleep. And so that is going to be a validated and reliable measure for sleep cycles, for sleep accuracy. And is this, thing that is on your wrist equal to or going to exceed the measure that is going to give? And if not, then what sort of weight or trust should we put in that to dictate how we're feeling? And yes, I used to wear this thing called a Pebble. It was like a Fitbit. Fitbit bought it and killed it. Actually, I love my Pebble. It was great.
I remember.
But when I would wear it to sleep, and it would tell me one or two things. It would say, are you feeling okay? You didn't sleep well yesterday. Or, wow, you slept great. Nice work. And when I saw that, like, are you feeling groggy? I was like, maybe I am. And then, despite if I was or not. And so the same thing with the Whoop that I wore for a week. I was anxious about getting to sleep so that I could get a good score on my Whoop the next morning. It would actually keep me up. And so maybe that's just me, but yeah, it's like, I don't know, train how you feel without somebody or something that isn't validated telling you. My 2 cents.
Cool.
Time.
Sweet. Kaylee, any thoughts?
I don't have a Whoop, never have, so I don't have a whole lot of input on that.
You're out. Yeah, so
I have always trained how I feel, so
yeah, go by how you feel. Yeah, I mean that's pretty much it. All right, so not a question we had, but someone did post a question in WODup in general. Hip clean, high clean, and tall clean. So I just want to go over what I think you're asking. Are they the same or are they different? So a hip clean and a high hang clean are the same. Okay, so that would be a full clean from the high hang position. So the bar gets into the hip, you dip, pause, and then from there, without re-dipping, right, we take it into a clean receiving position. But a tall clean is standing up straight and tall with no leg, no dip, no leg drive at all. We just upright row the bar and pull ourselves under it. So one is a warm-up exercise with very light load. The other one is maybe a technique work, but can be done probably substantially heavier, because one two of those are the same. Hip clean and high hang clean are the same. I would call them the same. Some people might not, but I assess them as the same. And then the tall clean is just a pull under drill.
We did panda pulls yesterday. I'd never heard of those.
Yeah, panda pulls. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of them. Mayhem's going through a panda pull progression. The problem with panda pulls is I think people just get really armsy. Like if they struggle to get to like power position in the hip, like it's but if you're just trying to build some upper body pulling power, I think they have a place. I did them for a long time early in my CrossFit youth.
Little did I know, I thought I was doing high pulls, but I was doing panda pulls the whole time.
So the difference between a high pull and a panda pull is a high pull is once you hit the hip, you upright row without flexing at the hip, you stay extended. But a panda pull, you get to the hip, basically you do a high pull, but you pull yourself down and you kind of drop yourself down into a semi quarter squat thing. One's like the Chinese do panda pulls all the time, so that's why a lot of people do them. All right. So all right, questions from this morning. We had a lot of them. This is good. Okay. Georgia asks, what's the benefit goal of the air bike sprints, the front squats for duration, and the 20 rep max back squat? How does it translate to other movements and workouts? At what point would we move from doing muscle up skill track to the programming training? Of course, we might get one during the course, but it's not to say we'd be able to do 1-1-1 several times. Sure. So first question, bike sprints, front squats, and 20 rep backs. So our squat focus of this phase is hypertrophy and volume accumulation. So we are trying to really, really get a lot of very heavy loaded squats under fatigue and under a lot of volume on the knees, so that when we finish this, we're going to be very much ready to hammer lots of thrusters and wall balls and jumping and lunge work, et cetera, which we will do during the phase. But we went through a big strength phase, low rep, high intensity in our last phase. Lots of PRs, lots of 1RMs, lots of doubles and triples and singles of the front squat and back squat. So now we're going into a volume or hypertrophy phase. We would actually probably call this more, this is like getting really CrossFit nitty gritty, what we call strength endurance. Okay. And so the front squat auto regulation. So for that duration, so we give you a moderate to heavy load of squatting and we give you a time frame. So what that's building, and this is very specific to CrossFit and not something that, is like in a like educational like literature or book. This is very like CrossFit terminology. OPEX has done a really good job of kind of creating some of these concepts, but we call it strength endurance. And basically it is our ability to express our strengths and absolute strengths under time, duress, and fatigue. Okay, so that's where the front squat comes in. We will continue to up the percentages over the time frame of the phase as the times increase as well, right? And it also creates an auto regulation, sort of like what Kaylee was saying. So if we just say 75% for 8 reps, that might feel a little bit different for everybody. So we're also just trying something new to see if it's a little more balanced and see if there's any type of big sway, like Joe was referencing, a standard deviation, right? So you might have some people that only get like 4 in 30 seconds and others get 12. Some people manage percentages better than others. As far as the 20 rep max back squat, just volume, strength, endurance. It's a very CrossFit-y test and cycle that you see, and we haven't done one, so I wanted to put it in there as well. And as far as the bike sprints, interestingly enough, when we tested the bike sprints back in July, the group did rough. Wasn't that great. Didn't have a lot of great results. Seems like a lot of the people that tested it, that didn't test it, are doing it now, which is great. So we're going to make some adjustments there. But the goal is anaerobic power expression. So this is peak power output. Okay. So our goal is to basically, this is what we consider like an alactic expression or alactic threshold, which is really trying to take our alactic system, which is like our most power, short, explosive energy system, and bump that up as high as we can. We found that doing a lot of bike sprint work, especially for females, can actually create a lot of strength gains. And so that's why we do it. At what point do we move from the ring muscle up track to the programming of training? When you're comfortable with them, when you can do them like 1-1-1. So if you are struggling with it still and you're missing, so you kind of pop in and you try and get it done, and you can't, stay in the ring muscle up work, or just add in singles, right? So if you're kind of like, I got it, I don't need to do the skill work anymore. If you're only doing singles and you're missing half the time, you probably still do need to go through. Maybe don't go all the way back to the beginning, maybe halfway through, and just rework the training where you're hitting a lot of individual muscle up reps. All right. So Georgia also asked, my collarbones are very prone to bruising and scabbing. I get married in 2 weeks. I want to continue training normally as long. So I wondered if you have any advice on minimizing bruising from clean and jerks, or how to switch up programming to avoid it. That's a tough one. Kayla, you have anything on that?
Honestly, they have these little sports bras called chesties that have like a pad right here. I don't know.
Does it go over the collarbone though?
I think that's supposed to be what it's for, I thought.
Okay.
But that's really all I could. I mean, if you are prone to just having those bruises, then I would say just avoid the front rack, or like a dynamic front rack position where you're landing on it for a couple weeks.
It's just 2 weeks. Just do front squats, right? Jerks, drop it from overhead, no cycling work, things like that for sure. Congratulations, by the way. But yeah, there really isn't. I mean, there's really nothing you can do about it.
2 weeks is a drop in the bucket. Look nice for your wedding.
Yeah. I mean, you measure your importance. Some people would be like, I don't give a, and they're like, I'm going to my wedding bruised. That's them. If that's not what you want to do, it's fine. Okay. Just do the front squats. If you don't want to do any front rack work, change all the clean and jerk stuff to more snatch work, and then change the front squats to back squats, and just back squat twice. All right. So, Andreas, sometimes in the daily videos, you say one piece of training is very important and we must do it no matter what. But there could be another way to know what pieces are the most important for improving our performance. Okay, so some days you're not able to finish, wants to know what is most important. Focus on your weaknesses. If the training's too long, prioritize the things you're not good at. If you're not very strong, do all the strength. If you think your strength is okay, but you need more conditioning, make sure to prioritize the conditioning. So we say to everybody all the time, if you need gymnastics work, do the gymnastics training for the day, etc. So find your weakness, prioritize the weakness on that day. Okay, so, all right, so at least I'm going to drop down. Joe asked, how big should the differentials in our splits be on pacing work? Is the idea that you're shaving off 1 second or 10 seconds? So anyone want to hit this or no? Maybe. All right. So when we do negative split work, the goal is just to get faster. If you are comfortable enough and you know you're pacing well enough, 1 second faster is great. Finishing on your last one at a full 100% effort. That means that you expressed the highest effort that you could and you got faster each time. That's very, very good. So 1 second is, I guess, the most ideal, but it's going to be very challenging because you need to really know where to start, right? So if you had 4 rounds and you went like 3 minutes, 2:59, 2:58, and then like 1:43, probably not the best idea, right? That probably didn't work out super well. But that's why we do it, right? The more you do this kind of work and you play with these pairings and you see how they are going to affect you, you'll know what your paces can be and what you'll be able to sustain, how fast you can recover, etc. When we have things like bike or row, the more time you spend on the bike and row, you'll just know how fast you can go to get a little bit faster each time. So in theory, the goal is going to be to start your first round as fast as you can while still getting faster each round. Most of us need to just start slow because we have no idea how to actually increase pace when we're tired. Okay, so the goal is start fast and faster. What everyone is most likely at is start slow and just build pace over time. And so either one is correct. If you start at like 6 minutes and then 5 minutes and then 4 and then 3 and then 2, maybe your first 2 chunks of the work were maybe a little bit too slow, but you still accomplished the goal, right? So the end goal is going to be to look at the piece and know exactly how fast you can go so that you can get a little bit faster each time and be able to start that first round at a moderate to high intensity and still be able to build. So that's the goal. All right, Lisa has a good question. Guess that's the same thing. So, interested in Joe's question about split times, tried to do the latter last week and then crashed and burned in round 4. This is pacing. This is what we do, right? So now you know this pacing is like, so it's a learning experience, right? All of our training is written to teach you something, right? Teach you how to feel, how to move when you're tired, or how these pairings express. I don't care. I care so little about what your time was, right? I care that we've hit the stimulus that we focused on and that we've built upon that. So you take that, you store it, you learn it. And then next time you see something anywhat similar, you'll know it's like, okay, I think I can do this and I can get a little bit faster. And so being very introspective is key. Okay. So the goal is to not crash at the end. If you did, then we started too fast or you built too fast. Maybe the first round was great. Maybe you built too fast for each one. Right. And so I don't know that. Only you will know that based on your results and how you felt within rounds 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right. Lisa's question. What is your advice for 60 plus compete regarding the RX movements? Should I adjust according to my age group, weights, and skills? For example, do I focus on muscle ups or work on chest to bar, box jumps, or box jump overs? 55 thrusters or 45-pound thrusters. My goal is to do well at quarterfinals this year. So anticipating weights, skills. Okay. So go check it. So first off, our tracks are designed based upon your skills, not upon your goals. Okay. So we have like our RX is kind of our quarterfinals track, or compete is our quarterfinals track. If you're doing compete, you should have all the skills. Muscle ups were in the 60 plus. Let's see what quarterfinals were this year. I'm pretty sure there were bar muscle ups in quarterfinals. There were, let's see if there were in the women's 60. So in women's 60 to 64, there were bar muscle ups. So in the compete, we're going to stick with that. So your question of the skill to your age group, that skill is in your age group now. It just is. Okay. If you don't have good chest to bars, then you shouldn't worry about bar muscle ups anyways, because you had to get chest to bars to get to that point in general. And you had to get a lot of toes to bar, right? So in the 60 to 64 age group, you should really prioritize getting very efficient at high volume toes to bar, pull-ups, and kipping handstand push-ups and chest to bars, okay? The intermediate track. If you are comfortable with those, then you need to continue to work on bar muscle ups, ring muscle ups, and handstand walks. Okay. So, based on your placing last year, I don't think the compete track is where you need to be. I think it's either RX or intermediate, working on those skills as well. Okay. The RX and the compete track are pretty much identical as of now, but they won't be in time. And the compete track will continue to increase in intensity, complexity, etc. But if you have the skills, then you need to work on the next skills. You need to work on handstand walks, bar muscle ups, and muscle ups. And then as far as the weights, we adjust the weights always for if we prescribe a load, we adjust it for the 55 plus. 55 plus has the same as 65 plus. So when you see a 55, so if you see thrusters in Fran, it's 95, 65, and we rode 75, 55, it's a 55-pound thruster for the 60 plus athletes. Okay. And so that's what we make those weight adjustments when we prescribe the load. Most of the time, we don't prescribe the load. Okay. But I think you mentioned box jumps. Everyone's box jumping. I don't care. We talked about this in the past. All our athletes box jump. Step overs. If you can box jump effectively, you'll step over just fine, but they will require step overs and quarterfinal or box jumps at some point, and we want to make sure we're prepared for that. So we always train a little bit more challenging. Kaylee, do you have any other thoughts?
No, that was my first thought, was what are they doing in that age group, and kind of go off of that. It's going to be the top of the is what they're expecting them to be doing. So
right. So your reference of thruster row calories, they did drop it to 65, 45. They don't always do that, so we're going to stick with the 55 pounds. So you'll see we're going to go with the more traditional and probably the slightly heavier load, because they don't always drop it to 45, 65. I don't know why they change it every year. It's never consistent. There's no standard. If you look at all the years, it changes a lot. Sometimes it's 75, 55 from 95, or even sometimes from 135, 95, it's 95, 65, or it's 115, 75. So it changes a lot. So we'll try and be as consistent as we can be, but there's no real rhyme or reason why CrossFit does what they do. Okay. And as it gets closer, we'll prescribe more loads and things like that once we get into kind of our quarterfinal prep, which starts in late December. But for now, work on the lowest skill that you don't have. If you just need work at chest to bars, then you need to be in the intermediate track. The intermediate track will for sure get you ready for the 60 plus quarterfinals. And then we'll tell you when to switch over to the compete or the RX track to get ready for quarterfinals. But for now, work on the lowest hanging fruits. Okay. We got a couple notifications to make sure it's nothing for and okay, I think we're good. Awesome. Do you guys have anything? No, like 15 seconds of fame. All right, cool. Thank you guys so much. We are super excited to do these. They're a lot of fun. We love answering the questions. We hope that more people join and watch the replay. And you can ask questions on YouTube here, or you can ask in WODup as you're watching it. And yeah, we will post the live replay probably tomorrow in the announcements so that everyone can see it. But it'll live here in this link for forever. So thank you guys so much. We enjoyed it, and we'll see you on the leaderboard in the group.